All right, so this meeting is now being recorded. And again, my name is Melissa Wenzel. I am the Built Environment Sustainability Administrator, and we are here to talk about the built environment activities here in Minnesota. We will have a chance for people outside of kind of our key messaging to talk about their updates, whether they're in Minnesota or outside of Minnesota. So this is meant to be a group effort. However, this is the very first meeting, so there are some things that we would like to share with you first before we get into that kind of discussion mode. Because we have 39 of you, in so little time, we would like you to throw into chat your name, your organization, and why you're here today. So feel free to share as much as you want to. You don't have to share anything about yourself if you don't want to, but this is your opportunity to let others know who you are and why you're here today. Kind of building this as a quasi networking opportunity for you all, but for us to learn from you as well. So feel free to do that. Thank you, Annika. And you can do that at any point today. So I'll do it myself to get the ball rolling. And while we kind of go through some overviews, you can go ahead and just provide your updates into chat. Great. And also for those that are not able to participate live, they'll be able to see this information when they view this presentation later. So here's the agenda of what we have for the next 2 hours. There isn't an official break, but there's a lot of times where you may just need to step away for a bio break. So please take the time you need to take care of yourself. And next up, we have Annika, who's going to talk about what we've been doing the previous year. Go ahead, Annika.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Melissa said, my name is Annika Bergen, and for those of you I haven't had the opportunity to meet, I also work at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency on sustainable materials management, looking to reduce our environmental impacts of materials and consumption overall through waste prevention and reuse programming. So I'm going to be pretty brief for my portion of our time today. We've provided presentations on these two topics in the past. So with the launch of these quarterly sessions, we felt like they served as a good foundation for explaining the work of our program and the direction we're going. But there are other opportunities for you to dig into this information more on your own time and reach out if you have any questions for us. Uh, so recognizing many of you from our building efforts and other forums that exist across the state and nationally, and also as all of these chats are flying in, seeing a lot of your job titles as well. I'm sure it does not come as a surprise when we have these stats on the screen that talk about the amount of building materials that are currently being disposed of and following more of that take, make, waste linear model. And so you can see that EPA in 2018 had estimated that 600 million tons of C&D debris was generated in the United States, which is more than twice the amount of municipal solid waste. And demolition represents more than 90% of that total C&D debris generation. And while we have these sort of overarching stats like this and set sort of that basis for measurement, what we have found in Minnesota is that while we still have a lot of opportunities for better understanding what materials are included in that C&D debris or C&D waste summary number, and which of those have greater potential for reuse or recycling, and then looking for those best ways to support how more sustainable materials management can occur. Melissa, if you want to hop to the next slide, please. I think we can actually skip this one. So this is just looking at the traditional waste hierarchy as well as the new waste management paradigm. So you'll see a lot of similar terms, but we're trying to flip the paradigm on it, or flip the hierarchy on its head to establish more of these norms where we're doing more in the upper end of the hierarchy and minimizing impacts across the full life cycle as we do new management strategies.
Hey, Annika, I just realized it's sharing the wrong slide deck, which is funny because I only have the most current one up. So if you can bear with me, we'll get the right one up. So
Oh, no
sorry
worries.
about that. Yeah.
It's all good.
Get the one thing that goes wrong out of the way, right? I'm just going to go back to sharing the actual screen, I think. Oh, there's the slide where the introductions are. Hey, I found it. Bye. Feeling very human today.
It's all good.
How's that?
I think we had
Yeah, that's strange.
different slide, but that's okay. We'll roll with it. I think this gets our point across anyway. So over the past couple of years, as I mentioned, we've had two main developments that have really been guiding our work. The first was a C&D composition study. And so in Minnesota, we have over 125 permitted solid waste facilities with C&D construction and demolition disposal areas. And so this report summarizes results from a study that sampled at 7 different facilities, representing over 1,500 tons of material. So you can see some of the breakdown of material composition in the statewide totals that are currently on the screen. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of time going in depth about more of the methodology or the background of that, but I'm going to drop in chat a link to the report that was published on this topic so that if you are interested or if you are doing a similar composition study at a more local level or in a different part of the country, we are very interested in continuing to expand what we understand is in the waste stream and can be removed from it, and opportunities for reuse in order to reduce the amount of new production of materials that are happening. And you can go to the next slide, Melissa, please. It looks like in the chat, someone's saying they don't see any slides. Is that I'm seeing them, but are others having issues?
I'm seeing them. I'm Jackie.
Okay, awesome. For the individual who can't see them, it may be worth trying to hop out and jumping back in. Sometimes I think Teams can be a little finicky. And then Melissa, yep, you're swapping it. Awesome. I think we're back a couple slides. Perfect, there we go. And then many of you were a part of this experience. So again, I'm not going to rehash a lot of this, but we want to make sure that if you're new joining us today, that you have the opportunity to hear about a really influential part that has been defining the work of this program. But in 2019 and 2020, we had the opportunity to engage with a stakeholder process, including local architects, contractors, recyclers, other government entities, preservation specialists, reuse retailers. So a whole slew of different experts in the built environment. And the outcome of that work group was to identify the 5 recommendations that could help strengthen sustainability in Minnesota's building sector. And so these will come back as themes, not only through the rest of this presentation, but as we continue these quarterly sessions, because the effort and the research that this work group did really has set the tone of priorities that our team is going to be working on or encouraging going forward. So as before, I am going to drop another link in the chat where you have the opportunity to dig into the report that summarizes that stakeholder process. And in both cases, for the C&D composition study, as well as this sustainable building work group, if you have additional questions or feedback, reactions to the work that is outlined in those, we very much welcome you to reach out and engage with us on those topics. So with that, I am going to hand it back to Melissa, and she is going to walk through where things have progressed since this point when we wrapped up the sustainable building work group and some of the future scope that's on the horizon going forward and opportunities for you all to be engaged as well.
Great. Thanks, Annika. And again, my apologies for the issues we had earlier today. So we've actually done quite a bit over the past year, and it doesn't sometimes feel like enough. We've done enough here in Minnesota because there are so many opportunities to take control and get change to happen in the built environment. At the same time, I was also redeployed to our state health department for 7 months, helping out with COVID pandemic work, and was only here 20% time. But during that 20%, I really put a lot of effort into supporting other activities going on. And so we did continue to build community outreach and provide some education opportunities, some speaking opportunities to support material salvage and reuse, to talk about the built environment, to talk about deconstruction. One of our next steps is to expand resources for deconstruction within the Green Step Cities program. And we are working with a number of cities who are very interested in diversion, in more sustainable building material management. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we are also working with state agencies, particularly Department of Administration, which oversees all state buildings, but also Department of Natural Resources, where they do have buildings that may not have any more life within that building, but we don't want to see those building materials go straight to the landfill. So a couple work in progress related topics going on right now. Also, we're working with the State Historic Preservation Office on preservation-based recommendations for their master plans. And we also hosted focus groups where we wanted to make sure, again, that as the non-experts in the room, we're not missing gaps, that we have our stakeholders, the people who are literally part of the environment, the built environment, letting us know where we might be missing some opportunities. And we've also submitted a budgetary request to the legislature. Sorry about that on-screen showing of my cat, Henry. So we actually did submit a fiscal request earlier this year or late last year for this legislative session, where we wanted to create a pool of funds that we could draw from to support some of our initiatives in the built environment. It did not move forward, and that's okay. It was the first time that we're proposing this particular funding request, and it's something that we're going to continue to push. So it's one of those things where we'll have an opportunity to submit the same request or a similar request at a future year, and we may ask for support for that particular request at some point. So there's some really great, I forget how touchy sometimes my computer is. So there's a lot of great developments we're working on right now. With our asbestos solid waste management team, we're actually working on having a section of the updated demolition, renovation, and deconstruction form to include a voluntary waste management plan. We know that if we don't start measuring what materials are going to landfills, we can't necessarily justify some of the initiatives we're working on. It is very clear that the sections are voluntary, and it's still in draft form at this point. And yes, Emily, it does contain a question that says, you know, have you submitted this to your local government if it's needed? So that was an idea that Emily brought to us. Other people did too, of course, but shout out to Emily right now. So we actually have a lot of support from our solid waste asbestos folks to do this. They're data driven as well. This form is only required for non-residential buildings with an assessment of asbestos. So it's not the entire universe, which may disappoint some of those who want a little bit more of that metrics developed. And we're going to hear later how one city in Nashville, Tennessee has actually instituted this particular concept directly within their requirements for submittal for a demo reno project. Yes, there's no changes, Jackie, with who has to submit the form. So the same standard of whoever had to submit it before is the same standard now. So yesterday, a few of us that are on the call, we presented at a webinar through Rethos. It's called Bringing Down the House, Understanding Deconstruction and Salvage. That was well attended. A lot of great questions, a couple questions that kind of stumped us, in fact, and I always take that as a good sign. And I just found out earlier this week that I'll be presenting at the Build Reuse National Conference. So I'm going to be presenting with Becker County. They had a diversion project to divert materials from landfills, and very excited to be accepted to present that. Next up, we're also working on a Metro Solid Waste Management Policy Plan, where we've been hearing from metropolitan counties that they need directives in that plan for them to carry out the goals that we share together for the solid waste plan for solid waste management. The conference is virtual, Jackie, so that's a really positive thing that anybody can attend. I'll be happy to share information about that link a little bit later. But yeah, we'll be suggesting some actions that counties can take to meet not only solid waste plans, but perhaps climate resiliency, perhaps things like considering deconstruction ordinances or diversion requirements, those kinds of things. So stay tuned for that. And we actually have something really exciting to share at this point. Thank you, Simone. I appreciate that. I'm going to turn off chat so that I don't interrupt myself, so others can pop in. And Annika, if you see somebody who has a question that nobody else can answer, you can verbally let me know about that. So while not all ideas and recommendations actually get met, that doesn't mean that we stop working on them. So for example, we did submit a fiscal requirement, fiscal recommendation to have deconstruction training being conducted. We submitted that to the legislature and it didn't pass. However, the work that we did to get that idea out there, working with Rethos, Reimagined, working with Better Futures, they would be likely the people to do the actual training. They actually were so excited about the idea of perhaps doing statewide deconstruction training that Rethos actually submitted a grant opportunity within the National Trust for Historic Preservation. They received a grant, they let us know very, very recently, to create a pilot series of virtual education opportunities for deconstruction and its connections to the broader field. And so that allows us to salvage more high quality historic components of unviable buildings and put them back in construction resource pipeline, making them usable in the future for rehab projects. So this grant is currently under development. It'll be 3 workshops. Each workshop will cover a different component of deconstruction, and they'll discuss the basics of deconstruction as a demolition alternative, the environmental benefits of deconstruction, and the intersections with preservation and material heritage. One centered goal is to have statewide conversation on deconstruction that prominently positions preservation and heritage professionals, allowing them to advocate effectively for the material reuse that will be most impactful within preservation and rehab projects. So these workshops will take place winter or spring of 2022, with initial curriculum development happening this fall. And unfortunately, the people from Rethos couldn't be here to say this, but they gave me this information, obviously, to pass along. So if anybody is interested in assisting with course creation or outreach, should get in touch with Rethos Education Manager, Natalie Hennigan. And I will try to put her email address in chat in just a second. We are also working on supporting efforts that other people are taking on, such as at the city and county. And shout out for Hennepin and Ramsey counties, because Hennepin County is continuing to offer deconstruction grants. And this is their 2nd year for doing that. And they've actually expanded it to also include full house moving or relocation. And so the requirements to be able to get that funding is on this slide. Again, this is their 2nd year doing it. And we know that a lot of times incentives is the best way to get some of these newer ideas going. But it's also a huge effort to get a program like this going, but it's a huge benefit to have these materials diverted from landfills. And so we're very excited that Hennepin County has been offering these, and seems like they're going to continue to some level. I'm also excited to say that Ramsey County is now going to be offering deconstruction grants as well. And so properties eligible up to $5,000, commercial properties up to $10,000. obviously using a similar concept to not only Hennepin County, but to other counties or other jurisdictions around the United States. There's these programs around the US and probably other countries too. But it's really, really great to see one county impress upon another county and get this going. And that may allow other counties to feel comfortable to offer this as well. So other counties out there that are on this call, please reach out to Olivia with Hennepin County and with Molly at Ramsey County for more information. I believe they're both here today. Another development we're working on, this is more kind of on the high level, just kind of making connections at this point. A lot of times people say, don't have a deconstruction ordinance until you have deconstruction training, people who can actually do the deconstruction. We've heard that. Well, what about the materials? Where is it going to go? How do people know where to find the materials? So as we in Minnesota have been looking at this particular question, we happened to come across two separate organizations that were creating map-based resource, reuse resource tools. And both of them using Google Maps, both of them using, some sort of legend with icons and things like that. And they kind of knew that the other organization was creating a similar tool. And I reached out to both once I found out both existed and said, is there any chance that you can choose one platform? They look so similar. It'd be really hard for us to justify sharing information for both of them. And they've agreed. And they are also speaking at the Build Reuse conference. They found that out earlier this week as well. And they wanted to pass along that the tool that they're working on, the one that'll merge both tools together, they hope to have it published in an expanded unified resource by late fall. The goal is to have a free and accessible shared tool that can help start conversations and build capacity for reuse around the US. So this is, perhaps one view of what it might look like. And it can be easily expanded, I think at least, to kind of drill down to the material level. Right now it's at the organizational level, but a tool like this can be adapted, I think, pretty easily where people could list materials in theory. So it's not necessarily their goal. It's just kind of a wish list of mine that I think is possible. As an informal call to action, people can think about the deconstruction, reuse, and associated local resources that you know about and start jotting them down, since there will be ways that you can add and continue to expand the database once the next version goes live. So unofficially, I've been researching salvaging and reuse and deconstruction, of course, but kind of think of the keywords we use on a regular basis and finding organizations in Minnesota that fit this. And it is a problem that people don't know that these companies and organizations exist. I mean, did you know that there are 13 Habitat for Humanity restores that serve Minnesotans and that 10 of them are in Minnesota? I didn't know that until I actually copied and pasted every single address onto a list. So those are the opportunities that we as state government feel obligated to start sharing this information, particularly to demonstrate that it's not just a Twin Cities metropolitan resource, that this is a statewide resource. And throughout my career, I've been challenged to make sure to think statewide, even if I'm in a city that is St. Paul or Minneapolis. So that's one thing that we're trying to do here in Minnesota, and something that I think a lot of people are trying to do in their states as well. All right. So in 2022, we are working on a number of initiatives very directly. We're working on them right now to get ready for them. And the first one is to create a deconstruction ordinance template. There's been some efforts already undertaken to kind of get those things started. And the first step is to create this materials management with waste management plan template. That's particularly why we have our guest speaker speaking about this topic today, because that's where we want to go. Do note that just because we have an ordinance template, we're not mandating anything. This is something for cities to consider to adopt within their own city. And in fact, our template will likely create multiple versions of it so that people can kind of pick what fits their city best. We will be kind of focusing on this particular tool for the Green Step Cities workshop, because we already have cities that are kind of ripe to take on this information and to consider implementing these sorts of initiatives. So we know that we kind of have to start at kind of a voluntary effort, but some cities are really eager to take on this topic and implement built environment practices within their Green Step cities developments. So those two go hand in hand. Obviously, we have a duty to support the deconstruction training that Rethos is working on, and we're very excited to do that. So we'll help them in any way that they need. And we'll still get requests from either cities or counties, even private business owners who say, I have a property, I'd like to have this building deconstructed. I think that the main organization in Minnesota from Better Futures Minnesota probably have more projects than they have people or time to manage them. And so seeking out other opportunities, including even like moving buildings, moving houses that are still livable in, trying to find another way to manage those building materials. And like I said, including working on Marketplace and other contracts where we can show support for some of these initiatives. So Annika, if you're able to throw into chat the link for our building group website, it is woefully out of date, but it does have a place where you can sign up to receive monthly updates. And we would love for people on this call to particularly sign up if you haven't already. And Kelly, I see your hand up. If you can unmute yourself and let us know what your question is or comment.
So on the deconstruction ordinance template, is the game plan to bring the group that was starting to work on that back in 2019 and 2020 back together, or will it mostly be MPCA agency developed?
I would love to have the people who are still interested, who helped develop that concept or that idea, to help out. I think at the end of the work group, I did send out a survey to say, what would you like to work on? Because not everybody who wanted to develop an idea might want to work on the actual plan itself. But Kelly, if that's something that interests you, we would love your help. And actually have that as kind of a next step slide of, you can help, get involved. Anybody on this particular meeting, or people who are watching this after the meeting is over, the live meeting is over, that is, can participate. So
perfect, thank you.
Great question. Are there other questions about some of these developments? I do talk fast. I should pause a little bit from time to time. Any questions about what we've covered so far?
Hi, Melissa. I have a question.
Yes, Jack.
I put in the chat, and I'm sure that this has been discussed, but I know from my experience, older buildings have a tendency to have asbestos. And so I was wondering if that special consideration was looked at, because that could cause the deconstruction to be a bit more costly, or even not necessarily even possible.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are aware of the number of challenges for deconstruction related to older buildings. Yes, they tend to have better materials, or materials that last a long time. But yes, for example, we've seen or heard other cities and states that have mandates for deconstruction, and it's kind of one of those deconstruct at all costs kind of thing. We're not going there. If we ever have a requirement, we recognize that we need to have some exemptions. As far as it being more costly, I've heard so many people talk on both sides of that because you're not having the tipping fees, the landfilling fees, and because you're able to typically either write off as a donation the materials, or you're actually able to sell the materials, that it isn't as costly. Usually it's the time, it's more time consuming. But you can see why we're having deconstruction grants or supporting deconstruction grants in Hennepin and Ramsey counties, because sometimes it is more expensive, or sometimes it's more expensive than somebody thinks. And to get that ball rolling, the fiscal assistance, I think, is sometimes needed. So kind of a long answer without much of information in it, but we do recognize that there are some fiscal restraints. And again, trying to get some funding, some training, some incentives, at least information out there to encourage deconstruction. We know that that's necessary. Good point. See another hand up, and that's from Nick. Nick, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Other similar question, actually, because it's related to something going on today. The Minnesota Department of Health is working on its lead paint regulations governing renovation work in a pre-1978 home, and just curious to see how you're looking at this plays into that program, which is also being put through the regulatory review. But also has to go through a separate review with the EPA. So it's kind of a convoluted way that we do rulemaking on this one, but just curious how you plan to make sure that works with that separate renovation requirements.
That's a good question, Nick. I can't say that we've spent a lot of time talking about this, but we also don't want to be in conflict of this. So we've known that lead paint, as well as asbestos and other materials in certain buildings, are an issue. And so that is not outside of the scope of these topics. I guess what I could say is that we don't want to be in conflict for what other agencies are doing on topics related to this. And so I'm not, maybe you and I can speak a little bit more offline so I can get a better sense of your question, because I'd like to know more about it. And I didn't know that there was a development going on today, but we do not want to be in conflict with other initiatives that are related to health or sustainability or other potential conflicts. So again, we're not deconstruct at all cost. We do hope maybe someday to have some requirements in place, but we will be extremely thoughtful as we get there because we know that there are limitations. So again, not a deconstruct at all cost perspective. Good question. Still another question, Nick? Or just leftover hand up?
Sorry, I meant to take my hand down. My apologies. Thank you for the answer.
I forget all the time. The reason I'm letting people ask a few questions right now is that we will have a guest speaker next. And so I just wanted to kind of get some of these questions out now while we're on this topic. Allie, are you ready? Yeah, excellent. Allie Omens, I'm sorry for saying that wrong at first. She and I met through a virtual conference last summer. And even though with Allie being at the city of Nashville and me being in the state of Minnesota, we realized how much we have in common as far as what our goals for our local or state jurisdiction, but also our values and our passion and dedication towards the built environment. And once I found out that there were some developments going on within the city of Nashville, actually work on some of the measurements for construction demolition debris, we knew that we needed to get her to speak in front of you all. So it just happened to work out that she's able to speak in front of, at the very first quarterly meeting. And we're very excited to introduce Allie to this meeting. Allie, welcome.
Great, thank you so much. And the last name thing happens all the time, more often than you would think. So no worries there. And I'm going to share my screen. Do you see that over there? Cool.
Yes.
All right, well, I am so happy to be here with you all to talk about our construction and demolition debris management requirement and the program that we've gotten started. It's great to feel like we are a city to look up to, since we so often feel like we are looking to our other peer cities that have gone above and beyond where we are going. But yeah, it's just been really great to see some progress here in the construction and demolition space. So, as Melissa said, my name is Allie Omens, and I'm the Construction and Demolition Recycling Coordinator for Metro Nashville Waste Services. I'm on the Zero Waste team for us, and I'm the one reviewing the plans for commercial construction projects and large multifamily residential projects and those larger demolition projects in the permitting process, asking for how they'll be managing debris material on their job site. And to give a bit of historical context, we have had a section of Metro Code since 2006 requiring that permit applicants submit a plan for the disposal of construction and demolition waste. So you might be thinking, are we 15 years too late on this presentation? But the reality is that although we had that piece of Metro code, we weren't actually able to collect those plans because there wasn't really any staff capacity there. So more recently, we passed a cost recovery mechanism to start reviewing those plans and collecting those plans in the permitting process. And what changed between now and then is Metro Zero Waste Master Plan. So the Zero Waste Master Plan outlines how our city can reach 90% diversion of waste to landfill by over the next 30 years. And so that really outlined construction and demolition material as a target material stream for diversion in our area. And between that and council support, we were able to pass that cost recovery mechanism that now allows our program to exist. So when I mentioned the cost recovery, we have a tiered fee structure that functions on construction value. So looking at those larger projects, mostly commercial and some larger multifamily projects, and that tiered fee structure starts at $50,000 and the tiered fee structure starts at the construction cost of $50,000. We have a $35 fee for those smaller projects and then moving up from there. And that allows us to have that staff capacity that I mentioned and also do a lot of targeted education, which is really kind of the take-home message here, that targeted education for job site specific activities and connecting people with opportunities for reuse and recycling in our area that they might just not be familiar with. And then also some software. So right now we have a form that we use, and I'll be showing that a little bit later. But there is some more robust software out there that allows for that tracking on the back end, kind of makes your life easier as a staff. So in the future, that fee will go toward software like that. And our peer city, San Francisco, uses some of that as well. So we're at the earlier stage, but hope to move into that in the future. To walk you through a building permit process, for example, on a construction process or on a construction permit. So someone will apply for a permit and then they have the construction debris management plan review as a line item on their permit. They are asked that information about how debris will be managed on their site and then the hauler and disposal location or recycling location. And to Melissa's point earlier about the deconstruction form that y'all have people fill out, there's not a requirement for how debris will be managed other than just going to a permitted site. So this isn't a requirement for recycling or for anything else, more of that data gathering and education on our side and getting that job site specific information just about how debris is managed. So once they submit that information, they receive their building permit and then they complete their construction. And on the back end, we have a report. On the front end, it's more of how do you expect your debris will be managed? What do you expect to generate? How much do you expect to generate? On the back end, it's that reporting mechanism of really what did you do? How much did you generate? Asking for things like tickets and other just kind of proof of debris disposal and recycling. And then that's on the use and occupancy. So we're really hitting them on either end to get the most accurate information possible. And also just to have that thought process really worked through of what debris will be managed and how you're doing that, putting the bug in the ear, so to speak. And so I'm not sure if I directly called this out, but this is a really new program. So since July 1st, we have had this program in place and been collecting debris management plans. Some metrics here, we have reviewed 98 construction debris management plans and 20 demolition debris management plans. So we're mostly getting construction. The demolition side, since a lot of those projects are in the $5,000, $6,000 range, we're just not really getting them hitting that $50,000 threshold, but a lot of construction plans and nothing on the UNO side since those projects are still underway, still doing construction. But some good learnings so far about what people are thinking through and what they aren't, which is just really fascinating. So I was able to pull the average diversion rate that we've seen since July 1st. And overall, this is just as I think Melissa had said before, the measuring or the you can't manage what you don't measure. And so we had information on the landfilling side and on the recycling facility side as a whole as to what debris, how much debris is being landfilled and recycled in our area, but we didn't have that job site specific information. And that's just so important for targeted education and really understanding the pain points to address in your area, and what job sites are struggling with, and maybe the thought process that you need to kind of help walk people through to think through how job site recycling would really work on their project. And every project is different. So just really great to also be in contact with so many more permit applicants, since we are in that process for the first time as a team. I'm going to go through a construction debris management plan, and also want to note that we have some resources on our website. So we have a PDF of kind of a how-to guide that walks through different screenshots of the construction debris management plan and the demolition debris management plan. So if you're interested, if I skip over some things that you didn't quite catch, you can find them on our website, and I can put a link in after, or Melissa can put a link in. If I pull this up. All right, so I'm going to skip through some of the contact information piece, but just want to make sure, can you all see the construction debris management plan up on the browser?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
You can see it. Cool. Fantastic. So basic information here, contact information. I'll skip over that in the interest of time, because the more interesting stuff gets back here. So we ask about any LEED certification, and obviously LEED is one of the more popular programs, but there are other sustainability building certifications out there. So we ask, move this here. We include a few just to prompt people, get that education everywhere. You'll just see little points of education all throughout this form, but not seeking another certification. We also have this button toggling here of, will you be requiring by contract that your contractor or material hauler recycle your construction or demolition waste? This is getting at, is your project recycling or not? I can speak to some of the program learnings a bit after this, but we were having people think that their hauler may be recycling their material when it's not, when that material is not getting recycled because it's not in their contract to do so. It's not a service that's being paid for. So we reworded that question about 1 million times now, and are actively working on making that more clear. But some job site logistics questions here that I will skip over. But any additional strategies to reduce waste, another point of education, any of that reduce and reuse that's earlier up the waste hierarchy than recycling. And then materials list. So we ask them to select from these common material streams what their project is generating. So getting at that scope of the construction that's occurring. And they can select other. So some roofing projects I've seen select other and have more specific materials that they're generating, because something more specific like roofing versus just a whole new construction or anything else. So we have that flexibility there, but trying to make it easy where you're just checking a box like that. So checking the box and then moving right along. We have our estimated landfilling section at the top. Another learning that we had is that we had this section at the top at first, and people saw recycling and thought that they had to do something that they didn't have to do, and were very confused and concerned. So we have decided to flip it around, that the landfilling section is first. If you know your project is recycling, you should most definitely fill out this bottom section, but you'll have that sense more than someone who is sending their material all to landfill and doesn't really know what to do with all of these sections that are asking about source separated recycling. And we have another iteration of our form that we're working on to clarify what source separated recycling is with a graphic and all of that good stuff. We have a conversion factor here that's based on the EPA, just generic cubic yards to tons of your average mixed C&D landfill dumpster. and then they're asked for hauler and disposal location. We, as a note, we convert things to tons so that at the bottom, we can provide them with a diversion rate. Again, that education of showing if you diverted or if you decided to pull out metals and get some money back for recycling metals on your site, that actually also results in diversion on your project. So you're getting money back and you're also diverting. So again, with just the education. So source separated recycling here. Calling out just a few main material streams that have outlets in our area for source separated recycling. And then converting to tons and asking for hauler or recycler, hauler and recycler. And they can provide it in either cubic yards or tons. And then any other recycling or reuse, if they are going above and beyond and are doing more material streams than these general ones, they have that opportunity to provide this here. And then that mixed, I kind of skipped over this, but if they're collecting material mixed, so all their recyclables together in a dumpster, that's where they would provide that information. The one thing that we have not been able to capture on this form is that there are some dumpster companies that allow for recycling and landfill to be in the same dumpster and then be separated by a processor. So there's not a great way to fill that kind of information in on this form, but working on adjusting that and then signature and submitting the form. So I just have one or two more slides, just more learnings to share for, you know, if we did this program over again, things that we would like to have known maybe going into it. So one of the main program learnings is just that communication all throughout the different stakeholders involved in a project. We're learning each and every day about the conversations that need to be happening just all throughout those different parties to make job site recycling a reality. And one of the main points of kind of confusion around that, or the main place where that communication is breaking down seems to be between the general contractor and the dumpster company. So we have, interestingly enough, seen, I think I mentioned this in when I was going through the form, that people enter in their debris management plan, so-and-so dumpster company has on their website recycling services, so that material on my project is getting recycled. And we see that and we think, well, yes, I see how you could think that, but recycling is a contracted service, is really what we're trying to drill down for folks. That's a service that you're paying for, that you're contracting for, and just assuming that because a dumpster company can do that doesn't mean that they will on your project. So really just getting at that questions that people might not be asking, and that chain of communication where we're seeing that just assumption where there maybe shouldn't be. Another point of communication, so this is kind of on our internal side. Our process lives both with the codes department that manages all the permitting and our ITS department that manages the software that all runs on. So we had direct conversations, pretty high level conversations with each of those parties, the directors, assistant directors, managers. But what we've now kind of realized is those conversations that you're having high level are very different than the process day to day, especially in the permitting process where things are just turning over so quickly and it's such a rapid, fast-paced environment that the people that are doing it on the ground, the plans reviewers, the zoning examiners, are going to have maybe a different understanding of what that process looks like for them. So a main example here is we designed our program with our ITS department to have an automated email function. So if someone enters a permit that falls into our requirement, they are automatically provided with our form. What we then learned a few weeks into the program is that the zoning examiners in our codes department don't include someone's email address in their permit application. So that form was never getting to them in the first place. And so that was kind of a major breakdown in our program at first. We worked through it and it's all, it's rough, mostly sailing now, but just little things like that the high level process isn't always what it looks like on the day-to-day basis when it comes to the permitting system. And then finally, once again, communication, but accessible communication. So you have so many different types of people applying for building permits, and also so much experience or varied experience with debris management on a job site. You have people that are applying for a permit for the first time, all the way to people who are familiar with LEED and familiar with all of that reporting and kind of the thought process that you need to go through to manage debris on your job site. So wanting to create a program that can meet all of those different needs and provide education in a way that is accessible and take someone from, all the way down to if they've never applied for a permit before, but maybe it sparks their interest to manage debris on their job site differently than they would have thought before starting our form. So wide range of communication needed, also in a niche industry, being construction and demolition. So just continuing to learn more and more about the importance of education, the importance of communication in all of the, in the program that we're doing here. And on the point of education, it's been beyond valuable to have access to permit applicants in this process and get these educational resources to them in that, so that maybe if they aren't going to change how they would manage debris on this project, maybe it'll change how they think about something for the next project, or just get those conversations started all throughout those different stakeholders, like I mentioned before. So also want to note that these resources are on our website, and the debris management form resources are at that link. Melissa can provide this slideshow to you all, and also I can quickly look up the links that I was mentioning and plop them in the chat. But really appreciate all of your time and love talking about this program. It's one of my main focuses right now in this work, and just beyond valuable to get this information from permit applicants and better understand on the ground what is happening in our construction and demolition industry here in Metro Nashville.
Well, great. Thank you, Allie. I did share in chat the link for the kind of the homepage for all of the construction demolition requirements, but also to the form, the Cognito form itself. Are there questions for Allie at this time? Or are there some that we missed in chat that we didn't get to answer?
This is Simona. I had a question actually. Well, so I realized that there is a group of people from the Minnesota Carbon Leadership Forum who is focused on construction and deconstruction, and I don't think any of them knew about this meeting, and I was wondering, Allie, if you'd be willing to present to that small group again.
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. It's so much to try to pack into I was trying to pack it all down as quickly as I could and probably sprinted through some things. But yeah, definitely happy to share more about the learnings and really guide people through what, like I mentioned, what I would have wanted to know before starting this program.
Yeah, I think so. Melissa, you're at the level where a program might happen, but I think this is a group that's more at the level of trying to figure out things to implement in construction, and they might be able to either give feedback or provide feedback to Melissa in developing this kind of program. So just trying to create the links, but I will reach out to you and copy Melissa. This is fantastic. Thank you.
Sounds great.
Yeah, we think this can be relatable to whether it's individual projects from a construction company, a contractor, or from a waste hauler. Obviously, the city, county, that kind of government entity makes a lot of sense too. So we knew that this would spark some interest among a variety of different people. There was a question during your presentation, Allie, what is the software name? And I wasn't sure from Emily Freeman if that was related to getting the data entry in from the user side, the Cognito side. So if you want to take yourself off mute, Emily, if you're still here, and clarify, or let me know if I was able to answer your question with the Cognito answer.
I think the question was like, Allie, are you using like a software to track the data as it comes in on the back end?
So the
Is it Green Halo or?
Green Halo, I didn't want to mention them as being the only one. It's just the one that kind of so many people use. They're a fantastic program, but there are others out there that track that in a more robust way. But right now, our zero waste team is the tracking software. It is that manual on the back end. We get an Excel spreadsheet that we can kind of maneuver and or use to better understand the data. But right now, and I didn't want to harp on this too much, but we are not getting super accurate data at the moment, even though that percentage that I pulled was from July 1st. Even within that, there's just such a broad range of people that disconnect between the dumpster company and whoever is contracting that service is very real, and people's understanding of whether or not their material is being recycled is very real. So in the earlier stages of having some good data or in the earlier stages of having data, and it's helpful to understand where the misunderstanding is, but we would want to get further into our program before investing in some more robust software as well, since it can be pretty pricey, but our cost recovery allows us to do that in the future. And that's been really helpful for, for our program, having that fee structure.
Thank you, Allie. I'll email you with more specific questions.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. It's like I said, it's most of what I'm doing now, and it's really exciting, and would love to see more places implementing programs like this.
Allie, can you put your email address in chat?
Yes, of course.
So Kelly Kish from the city of Minneapolis says that she has a lot of questions and may follow up with you directly. Thank you so much. Kathy, markets for materials are key to meeting diversion percentages. More markets are needed for wood, drywall, carpet, etc. That's a really, really good point. The fines is a material that is beneficially used for landfill instead of soil. Yeah, and those are things that internally here in Minnesota, we do have market development staff, and it's something that we do bring up with them from time to time. Yes, there's no point in recycling something if you can't turn it into something else. We are also more focused on the upstream. Can we prevent waste? Can we reuse materials so that's not waste in the first place? Any other questions for Allie? We're a little ahead of schedule, so don't feel like you have to hide your question. I see a hand up. That is Beth. Go ahead, Beth, from the city of Northfield.
Thank you very much. Hi, Allie. I'm curious, what's sort of the population that is served by this Metro Zero Waste Plan? My city is just outside the metro area here, and so we don't fall under a lot of the metro requirements, but trying to nudge our county to do some things.
Yeah, so I can kind of help to answer that. Here we have a metropolitan government, which is the city and the county. So the Zero Waste Master Plan is that piece of kind of uniting the city center, more downtown area with the surrounding county. And that's who is kind of governed by our Zero Waste Master Plan, but our waste services team, the zero waste side, rather than the operations side that does our trash pickup and recycling pickup. We kind of use that as our guiding document in some of the policy efforts that we're pursuing. Yeah. I'm not sure if I entirely answered your question, but we have a bit of urban and a bit of rural here kind of around Nashville, although rapidly becoming less rural.
How big is Nashville population-wise?
700,000 was, I think a little over 700,000 was the most recent census data.
Wow, good deal. Kelly, I saw your hand up briefly. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do. And like I said, I have many, but one, and I'm sorry if you answered it. I had a quick chat with a coworker here, but in working with the planning folks, were they really receptive to some of the changes that likely needed to be made to your ordinances, or kind of the procedure to allow for this to happen. I know we've got like our demo permits are a very short amount of time. So to get them to kind of change some of their procedures and, you know, even consider allowing these new reuse, salvage, deconstruction pieces, there's a little bit of hesitation there on what exactly they would need to do and the support.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's almost a little bit different for us because that piece of Metro Code, that section was in there since 2006. So that was something we used as justification in pursuing this cost recovery, is that, hey, this has been in code. We haven't been able to enforce it. We need to start enforcing it. And I'm forgetting the other part of your question that I was going to answer. Oh, yes. So this program only applies for those commercial and larger multifamily projects. To your point of the turnaround time on some of these, we don't really get a lot of demolitions, and those are the the quickest turnaround. And then the single family homes are a very quick turnaround. So our program is more focused on hitting those larger projects that will have more debris generation per project. So that was also helpful in avoiding slowing up some of that process, or the perception that we might slow up some of that process. The place where we got the most pushback, I would say, and I'm very glad we kind of fought through that, is on the UNO side. So it's so important to have the use and occupancy. I should not use my acronyms. Use and occupancy after the construction has occurred, use and occupancy to be able to inhabit that building, to actually start getting people in the structure. We did not want, or some folks internally maybe were a little hesitant on having our process be in the use and occupancy process, because that is such a quick turnaround time. And I wasn't a part of some of those direct conversations, but we made the case that it was really important to get that information after the project has been completed, because it's really hard to gauge pre-project debris tonnages. People try their best and kind of do the math on how many dumpsters they're renting and maybe how many pulls are going to happen over the course of their project, but it's not as accurate as that, you know, after the project has been completed and there's the opportunity for tickets and all of that. But I'm also happy to connect you with some other members of my team that were more directly in those conversations, and how we were able to get ourselves on the use and occupancy side, and just any conversations that needed to be had to push this forward.
Thank you.
Olivia has a question in chat too. Do you anticipate the scope of the C&D debris management plan extending to projects less than $50,000 and or single family residential properties?
Right, we've gone in a lot of different directions internally about how we might think about that. Our next course of action is looking at some policy for us as Metro government and our construction projects. So we have lead requirements for construction projects that are happening. I mentioned that urban services area and that general services area, or it's the inner downtown and the more surrounding county. We have different lead requirements depending on where those projects are located. But no requirements specifically for diversion of C&D materials. So LEED is so much more than waste reduction, obviously. And the next step for us is to shore up some of those requirements for Metro projects to require things like recycling and pulling out key materials, target materials that have really robust end markets in our area, and then looking to, after that, potentially pursuing some external facing policy that would impact the private sector, and do some of that more external facing policy. But the way that our fee is set up right now, it's based on that construction value. So we would, in the future, if we were to do something more residential focused, we would need to develop another fee structure, and also have some more staff as well to dedicate some education. Most of the educational resources that you'll see on our website are for the commercial projects. The residential sector is a much different beast, and we also haven't really been working with any of the home builders associations or anything to let them know about all of this education that we're trying to do. So we need to kind of start from the beginning there and move forward. But hoping to, do some of that at some point, but the timeline there might be a little different.
Emily Barker from Reuse, Minnesota has a question related to the cost trigger. The metric of a cost threshold can change drastically, as has been seen this last year. Have you thought about switching to a size volume metric instead of a construction value?
That's a really good question. In our so trying to meet everyone halfway in the codes process, and knowing that we are one of many reviews that goes on. The codes department at the moment doesn't capture project square footage in a way that would make us, that would allow us to do a fee based on square footage. So we chose construction cost because it was the next best indicator for how much debris a project will generate. And I agree that that volume metric might be a bit more accurate. Maybe accurate is not the right word, but it would be another opportunity to tie this legislation to. But at the moment, I think we're gonna stick with construction costs, but collect that project square footage value in the form, because that's really helpful data.
I think we have time for one more question. If anybody has a question that they'd like to ask live to Allie at this point. Okay, hearing none. Let's give Allie a virtual round of applause. You can do the sign language version of it. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Allie. It was great to connect with you and to be able to demonstrate some of the goals and some of the projects that we're developing in Minnesota, to actually see it actually happening live in other cities, I think is extremely helpful. So thank you so much. And let's see, and I have corrected your last name. It's now on the slide correctly. All right. So this meeting is also meant to allow people who are in Minnesota to have a chance to talk about some of their initiatives, what they're working on, what you want to see change. And so this is your time to provide your thoughts for those of you in Minnesota. For those of you outside of Minnesota, you'll have a chance and after this particular session. So I open the floor to folks to provide their thoughts to the group. What's going on in your world? Now, I didn't prep anybody for this question, so hopefully somebody has some thoughts to provide.
Melissa, this is Emily. I don't have any updates other than just to say, for those who aren't aware, I have previously been with the City of St. Louis Park. I am now the Executive Director for Reuse Minnesota. And so one of the things I'm excited about is diving right in and continuing that work and working on policy around deconstruction. One of the things I wanted to share is that we have funding through LCCMR, which is essentially the Environmental Trust Fund money that gets funneled through the DNR. And one of the pieces of our funding is specifically in relation to policy change of some sort, whether that's legislative or ordinance-based, that is related in promoting and supporting reuse. Now, that could be deconstruction, it could be a number of other things, but I wanted to put that out there because if there are groups that are kind of on that threshold and ready to take the step, if there's things that we can help with, let me know, because we have this piece of my time that's allotted through the grant to work on ordinance and policies. So I would love to be involved, love to stay connected. This is something that I'm personally very dedicated to, having supported it in the City of St. Louis Park the last several years. So I wanted to just put that out there as a resource and put people in I'll put my email in the chat for anybody who might want that, but you can also go to our website to reusemn.org. Thanks much.
Jackie had a question from DOT. Are you affiliated with the University of Minnesota?
We are not. That's the Reuse Center. Todd Tanner is still there. Reuse Minnesota is its own independent nonprofit that's been around for about 10 years. And next year will be 10 years. And this is the first time we've had actual employees, staff. There was a management company a couple of years ago that helped do the workshop, if any of you went over at the U. And they were there for a couple of years, also through some LCCMR funding. But yeah, we are separate.
I'm going to jump in while others are thinking about their updates or things to share with the group. I wanted to let folks know as well for another opportunity later this fall. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has our environmental assistance grants, and we are going to be opening a grant round that is for focusing on waste reduction and reuse very broadly. So it doesn't, again, need to be for the built environment, but given all of the opportunities around material reuse and salvage and reincorporating building materials into construction renovation processes, wanted to put that out and start people thinking about it. So you'll see more communications coming from our team on that front as well. So if you or your organization are interested in applying, please keep that on your radar for this fall.
And that is
Put a-
relatively, I was going to say that's relatively new news too, which is why we haven't had a chance to talk about this in Gov Delivery or other elements. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, Annika. Thank you. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No, not at all. I was just going to say, I'm going to put a link in the chat for the environmental assistance grants page. Right now it is not updated because in between rounds, sometimes it gets cleaned up and doesn't have the old information. So it'll seem like there's something missing, but you can still sign up for that grant distribution, which is where we'll be sending the initial notification of when that RFP opens. And then there'll be more information posted on that website as well in terms of project eligibility, scope, and timelines.
Great, thanks, Annika. Others from around Minnesota, are there things that you are working on, you want to work on, you need support for, and build awareness for? I'm going to guess that Beth has something to say.
Yeah, thank you. Beth Callistad, City of Northfield. We are working on getting a zero waste plan adopted. It was one of the items in our larger climate action plan. We've had a stellar group of volunteers and some Carleton College student help to draft the plan. And hopefully this fall our council will accept it. But I think then the bigger questions for us are capacity to implement and trying to figure out how to balance that with, as a non-metro county, or non-metro city, our county is our solid waste kind of management entity. So our staff capacity at the city is pretty limited to do this work. And so we're thinking about how we can get some of it done, and then also how we can try to encourage and maybe move our county toward adopting it, since there are couple of cities in the county that could benefit. So if any smaller cities have recommendations, I would love to hear them.
Are you Dakota County or?
We are right on the border. So we have a small segment, maybe a fifth or less of our population is in Dakota County. The majority is in Rice County. So we go under the Rice County solid waste management piece.
other developments from around Minnesota. You can put them in chat too if you're not ready to, vocalize them. But this is also an opportunity of where you might want some help and assistance on various goals that you're trying to achieve within your organization. And obviously, if you think of something later, that's fine. And you can throw it in chat anytime.
Melissa, this might be a time to mention some of the conversations we've had about AIA Minnesota and Committee on the Environment and how we are. So I'm currently one of the co-chairs of Committee on the Environment, and we are looking at ways to support architects in putting language into contracts and helping facilitate that communication to make sure that recycling happens and that kind of thing, but also how we can support salvage and reuse efforts through language, through, I think, visual demonstrations of beautiful work that has been done using salvage materials, and just kind of building that recognition and kind of market visibility of the potential in an aesthetic way. I think that's something we're really interested in. I'm really interested in personally, and I've got some resources to support that right now. So I would be interested in anyone who is also interested in that, chat with me.
You want to talk more about what AIA is for those that might not know?
Right. AIA is the American Institute of Architects, and it's just the professional group for architects in Minnesota, well, in the US. Yes.
The Minnesota chapter, yeah.
Yes, the Minnesota chapter.
And for those of you who have seen our built environment map that we've created, the goal is to work within all parts of the building material management system. And of course, manufacturing and design are very definitely part of the system. It's not just a material or waste management, it's a design for reuse or design for deconstruction, things like that. So it's been great to connect with Yannicka and Simona and others in the architectural fields to help us rethink or reuse some of the building materials or how to design things to be reused more sustainably. It's been a great endeavor to connect with this organization. Okay, well, feel free to pop up if other people have thoughts. Olivia?
Yeah, this is Olivia from Hennepin County. I just wanted to share that we are currently looking into adding a component for our 2022 deconstruction grant program to incorporate salvage and reclaimed materials back into projects. So just kind of a request, if any folks are aware of programs and other communities that already are looking at this or have grant programs, I would love to take a look at those and check them out, because we are still in the process of developing what that eligibility and criteria would look like. So if you have any thoughts or things to offer, please let me know.
And if you didn't already, feel free to put your email address in chat. There's several people who can't make it to this live, so other people will be watching this later. Cool, great. Well, we're going to switch gears to outside of Minnesota. So again, we are creating space for those that are connected to the built environment but may not be in Minnesota. We feel pretty strongly that we can learn from you. We can work with you on shared goals. So for those that are still around and you're outside of Minnesota, this is your opportunity to kind of share what you're working on, or if you believe there's any overlap and relatability to what we're doing, feel free to mention it. And just trying something new here. So if you don't have anything you want to share at this time, that's okay too. You can always contact me directly. I'll also put my email address in chat as well. This is your time if you would like to talk about what you're working on or what you want to work on. Sometimes us hearing other ideas, even if they haven't been worked on yet, can spark change. I see a hand up. It is Gretchen. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm with a group in New York State, which is a collaboration of planners, preservationists, reuse professionals, architects, some faculty members at Cornell University. And we have formed a group called CROWD, Circularity, Reuse, Zero Waste Development. So we're working in upstate New York, which is generally considered everything north of New York City. We're doing a whole lot of different things, many of which you've covered here in terms of policy development, data collection, and so on. But we're also working on a statewide level to elevate awareness and knowledge and try to involve other people. And so one of the things I wanted to just mention that we have an informal partnership with the Land Bank Association of New York State, which involves about 24 land banks around the state. And so, as I'm sure you're familiar, land banks, obviously, their goal is to rehab properties to put them back on the market. But there are many properties that they end up demolishing. And so we're trying to find some funding to allow us to partner more formally with this association so that when their members are involved in a demolition, that they come to us and we work together to instead deconstruct and reuse the building materials. This goes to the abatement issue as well, because with their limited budgets, they feel that if they could use their budgets to first abate, and then we could somehow find funding to then do the deconstruction, it could potentially be a win-win for everyone. We have not gotten to a point where we've actually worked on any of these sites, but this is really something that we're trying to pull together. So I just wanted to mention that as a possibility for any states that do have land bank associations, as one of the ways that we're trying to just, again, elevate this issue on a statewide level.
That's a really, really great point. And I've been meaning to kind of connect with our own land banks a bit more. There's organizations called like Land Banks Twin Cities. I don't know how closely they overlap with the work that we do, but I should look into it. I am familiar with our port authorities that do oftentimes buy up contaminated land and prep it for use. They also do rehab buildings. And for those of people who are familiar with downtown St. Paul, an old Macy's building is now a multi-purpose restaurant, bar, ice skating practice place. I don't know hockey as well as I should, but it's used by our state hockey team for a practice arena, I believe. And so they're able to really, really invest in a kind of an odd windowless building, the Tria Center. Is that's connected to that building too? That's right. There are so many purposes for that building, so many uses. So that is something we should look at a little bit more often. And I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. I see another hand up. Joshua, go ahead. Thank you.
All right, sorry, I had to unmute. So Melissa, it's nice to kind of virtually meet you. We've had a lot of nice correspondence through social media, but I enjoyed this. I think that I'll introduce our company quickly. We are a deconstruction company called Recycleen. You can see in the background, it's kind of a little bit of a play on words. I thought this was very educational because I feel like our roads kind of intersected from different angles. So my professional background is in commodity trading. I actually found this company and became an investor starting as a customer over a decade ago. A farm kid from Indiana bought the house behind me. It was a bad house. It was built in the early 20th century, and I knew it needed to come down. And I ended up finding this business to take it apart. And I think the driver for me was the economic model. I ran the numbers, realized that if I donate old growth lumber and all these other materials, even back in 2011, that the income tax benefit was enough to fund the project. And then all of the other, what I viewed to be ancillary benefits, the environmental benefits, the goodwill of not throwing those items into the landfill led me to approaching Mike Goffman, the owner of this business and the founder of it, and investing in it. And here we are about 10 years later, and I've completely made a career change. And so, I guess hello to the group of people. I think our, traditional business is with, I would say, in the private sector, dealing residential type business with people that are taking houses down or doing remodel projects. That's grown to doing business in the commercial sector. A lot of fit out. So go in and maybe it's an 8-story downtown Chicago type building that will go in and recover as much of the brick and other materials so that they can repurpose that building for other needs. And we try to donate all those materials. And then more recently working with municipalities like the city of Milwaukee, who has been working to launch their deconstruction ordinance and has put out a few things. So anyhow, I wanted to, I guess, introduce us as a deconstruction business based out of in between Chicago and Milwaukee. We've traveled to New York for projects in the past. We've traveled to Texas. I'm very interested for the right project that makes, financial sense for everyone to explore any opportunity anywhere. And really impressed with the work you guys are doing. So that's enough. I'll take less of your time now.
It's funny, with various positions I've had, I get involved with one social media platform or another, and LinkedIn has definitely been the one that I've really latched onto because I've met a lot of people at the Circularity conferences over the last couple of years and have connected on LinkedIn. And so Joshua and I have exchanged several posts, and people know me as kind of a community cheerleader, and I really enjoy learning about the work that Joshua is doing. I believe it's been mentioned too via LinkedIn that you are, like you said, depending on the right project, able or willing to deconstruct here in Minnesota. And in the short term, we may definitely need to tap you for a project or two. So I appreciate that willingness to possibly at least listen to some of the projects we might have on tap for you to consider deconstructing. So it has been great to hear some of these successes, see the stories in social media on LinkedIn, to actually see the buildings that are being deconstructed. And so I've been grateful to learn more from you, Joshua. Thank you. Others, anywhere. What would you like to see to be the change in your world? I definitely won't force that topic. Again, you can email me if you do have something that you would like to share. And let's turn it back over to presentation mode. One moment, please.
As you're pulling that up, Melissa, just going through the chat too, Kelly had put a plug that she's interested to learn more about various front-end reporting tools, software, like what Allie's team is using with Cognito, more about the capabilities, functionality. So just wanted to read that out too, if there are others who are aware of some different platforms or software that are operating in this space and have more to share, reach out. Can reach out through our group or directly to individuals if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, thank you for that. So for next steps, there's a couple things simultaneously. We would love to have some help on the various developments that we're working on. And if you have an interest in working with us on the deconstruction ordinance templates, on Green Steps Cities workshops, on deconstruction training, or anything else that comes to your mind, inside or outside of Minnesota, we won't turn down help if people are willing to help us out. We know that you're probably willing to work with us because you might get something out of it. You're trying to implement something yourself. Similarly, that's okay. But if you want to throw in chat or email me directly, if you are willing to work on a certain initiative, that would be fantastic. For those that were work group members with our formal stakeholder, we do have the list of what people were interested in, and we'll be reaching out now that this meeting is nearly concluded. We'll be able to kind of focus things on more of a project-specific initiative moving forward. And also that'll mean that future meetings will also be focused on some of these topic-specific initiatives. And so it's kind of for those in the work group mode, this will feel a little familiar, kind of back to that world again, but at the same token, kind of having a more deliberate effort on working towards implementation. So let us know if you are interested in any of those developments. I can send out an email to everybody and kind of reiterate that. I'll be doing that anyways to send out the link for this recording as well as notes. And we could use some help. planning these meetings. We plan them to be quarterly. We may or may not have a guest speaker depending on what's going on for the agenda that particular quarter, but we would welcome some help finding these meetings too. So that's kind of an ask that we have. We're thinking about having the next quarterly meeting in early to mid-December, early January if we need to. With the obvious dates already fresh in my mind, are there other dates that we should avoid? Feel free to put them in chat, take yourself off mute, or email me that. I don't know if there's like major conferences that I'm unaware of here, particularly here in Minnesota in December. And of course, these will be virtual, so anybody can attend if they'd like to. I don't have access to chat at the moment, so I don't know if there's anything in chat.
Not at this point.
Okay, sounds good. And finally, we want people to sign up to receive updates. So I'm going to take myself off chat, throw that web link in again, and please share this webpage with your interested colleagues. We do send out the most formal and also what I'd consider the most important information in our monthly newsletter. I do see a question from Yannicka. Be curious on your perspective on whether there's something in the private sector we can do to help the initiatives we identified funded. Perhaps this is difficult with the divided legislature, but if there's something that comes to mind, let us know. Do you want to talk more about what you're thinking, Yannicka?
So the impetus for the question is the what you had stated earlier in the presentation, where the short list of recommendations that the Sustainable Buildings Work Group came up with. I don't know if all of them didn't go forward, but that, and I know the MPCA is still pushing and working on doing what you can to push them forward. But we had identified, so that's great, but what we had identified in the Sustainable Buildings Work Group through that process is that, like, really the goal of this was to get some funding for policy initiatives to move forward. And so if there's anything, I know a lot of times pushback from legislature is on funding new initiatives is like the private sector doesn't want it. So we can be a, I don't know, we can bring the voice of the private sector that does want it to the forefront, if that's helpful. And then I just wanted to mention that because, one, there's probably some other private sector folks on here whose companies would support funding for initiatives, especially in deconstruction training and kind of waste reduction efforts for C&D. But also because through AIA Minnesota that Simona was referencing, advocacy, there's a lobbyist that we had been working with that has made a lot of headway on advancing initiatives that AIA Minnesota wants to see funding for in the legislature, and pushing those ideas forward. So I was wondering if MPCA has any role like that. And the reason, again, I bring that up in context of this group is because one of the things that helps those initiatives move forward with the lobbyist at AIA Minnesota is testimony from folks that work in the industry. So like if we can create a bank of volunteers to, like, I'd be willing to speak to the legislature about a certain thing to like bolster the initiative and show that there's support for it. That's just another thing that I know has been really impactful with other organizations. So wondering if y'all are working on that, if that's already been done and I'm just not in the loop, or I wanted to put the bug in other people's ears too, to see, to encourage folks to get involved if that's available to them. So.
I can't speak for anybody else, but it's not something that I've been deliberately focused on or thinking about. And my mind is going into a kind of a spider web of like explosion of ideas and follow-up questions. And I might set up a meeting with you directly. But I think reaching out to those that may have an opportunity to either help secure funding or to provide funding because they believe in this and they are in the private sector, that would be extremely powerful. If I understood that from what you were saying, that would be the case, or at least to get them to say that, yes, I'm willing to spend money on this if it became a policy or requirement. I think the more we can get the support from within the built environment system, the better the process will be going forward. So it's not an avenue I think I have thought of, and I think I need to definitely think about this a lot more. Yeah.
Well, and I think that I should be clear too. I'm not necessarily saying that my organization would fund an initiative, but we would support like paying taxes towards something, and like our tax dollars going toward that. So like a lot of times that argument is used against us, right? Where private sector and business don't want to pay for stuff via tax increases, et cetera. And I know that there's other ways to get things funded, but just as an example, it's the easiest lowest hanging fruit, right? But yeah, like my organization does support this financially by paying for my time to be here. So like that's something that I think is very, other organizations, especially on this call, but also elsewhere, have similar ideas, and we're all trying to, I think we're all trying to, solve the climate crisis any way that we can. So wanted to just like bring that up and say, I'm here for it, let's do it.
That's awesome, thank you. Looks like there's some others that are supporting that as well. Nick has some statements too. Strongly recommend MPCA staff reach out to Department of Labor and Industry regarding authority over building regulations and permitting, as well as Department of Health for its lead paint regulations. Absolutely. I'm waiting to hear from Colin Boysen. He's our asbestos manager here, program coordinator here at the MPCA. So he used to work at Department of Health. And there are some questions that we have that we believe can be answered by Department of Health, just kind of around some of the mandates and things like that on asbestos, other materials. And so obviously anybody who's dealing with demolition, deconstruction, they're pretty busy these days. And so he's not been able to make that connection. But again, we feel very strongly that we don't want to be infringing on other requirements or being in conflict with other policies. So Nick, I did at least draft an email with your name and a subject line so that we can kind of connect again, because I know we've had that one meeting quite a while ago, and I'd like to talk with you a bit more about this stuff. So I think we're on the same page, and I definitely want to make sure we're not doing anything that is in conflict with other agencies, organizations, and requirements. So thanks.
Also, I'm just going to hop in real quick back to Jannika's question as well. I think one thing that maybe the direction you were going, Jannika, is so the MPCA and sort of the state process has obviously a very structured approach to how some of those requests get put forward and cycle on a certain timeline too. So being government, of course, there is a lot of red tape that goes into that process. So I think one thing, especially in a case that you're talking about, if there are organizations that are really strong supporters of the 5 recommendations that were developed with the work group or other ideas that could help further the efforts, I think I would encourage, if there are opportunities for more conversations around that, because our team has to follow that really rigid government process step by step to get approvals to have these recommendations move forward. It doesn't have to be something that has to come from the state. So if there is a really passionate group of private sector or non-state entities that wanted to put forward a recommendation to the legislature or move an idea forward, in some cases that might have fewer hoops to go through. And so even though these came through a process of a state stakeholder process, it doesn't need to remain within our team. We're going to keep trying to move things forward, but if that was a space where you knew your organization would want to advocate for a request for a funding pool to do one of the recommendations, I would encourage others to reach out if you feel like that is the case. And then we are able to be involved and an advocate for that. In some cases, the PCA can do a letter of support, and that could go forward and maybe have a different impact or get received differently at the legislature because it wasn't coming through a state process. So one other thing to keep in your back pocket.
And Annika, I want to add to just, I know Annika's here with her PCA hat, but she's also on our board for Reuse Minnesota. And I just want to note that one of the nice things with Reuse Minnesota, we are not government. we are a member-based organization, so any reuse businesses can join or individuals can join, and we can definitely be a vehicle for that as well. That's another chunk of the funding that we have in our LCCMAR grant, or as I mentioned earlier, is the policy piece, and it's frankly something that I really like, the policy and the funding piece, like going to the legislature and things like that. So I would welcome you to reach out. If you're able to join us as a member, that's great. But we're interested in working together. And we function as like a trade association, essentially. So it's a little bit of an easier vehicle that, like Annika said, that may be able to help with that legislative stuff. And just so you're aware, I worked for the PCA before, and I worked in a city. So I like maneuvering the government machine in a way that I can move our policies forward. Although, of course, there's always new things to learn with legislative relationships and how that all changes every year. But I'm excited to do that work. So if I can be a resource, let me know.
That's wonderful. That's been one amazing thing about this built environment world, is just there is obviously overlap between different organizations, different companies, but also the willingness to partner together to be able to get something done. And as we saw with the Rethos future deconstruction workshops, that sometimes it's the right organization at the right time requesting the right thing to get things going. And it still is a huge group of support to make something happen, but organizations might be able to, like everybody's noted already, be able to navigate through some of the processes faster than we can. So great. We are at the end of our agenda, and I just want to thank you all for being here. And if you were not able to participate live, thank you for watching us. We will be setting up, like I said, another quarterly meeting either mid-December or early January, and we really hope that this has been helpful. This has been a little new. Sorry for some of the little glitches at the beginning, but this has been a great opportunity for us to connect with you and vice versa, to kind of get some of these ideas kind of in a public awareness arena, but also for us to start working on that implementation phase. So for those who are just as impatient for change as we are, thank you for your patience, and thank you for being impatient as well, because that actually helps kind of drive some of our initiatives. It certainly motivates me, I'll be honest. So a couple more comments are coming in. Kimberly, you are welcome. Thank you for joining us. David represents a simple end user of services in the construction deconstruction industry. Cool. Our nonprofit organization is within the early phases of a large remodel project. Appreciate MPCA's efforts to provide deconstruction education excellent for vendors. We've been working hard to repurpose building fixtures before contractors start their work. It would be beneficial if more companies use services such as the Minnesota Materials Exchange, thereby increasing the market for repurposed materials. Thank you for great work. Thanks for saying that, David. And yeah, I've been wanting to connect with you a bit more, so maybe this will be the impetus to do that. So, wow. Great first meeting, everybody. Thank you all very, very much. We'll be back in touch with meeting links, the recording notes, things like that, and next steps on how you can get involved and information about the next meeting. Thanks, everybody. I'm turning off recording. I won't leave yet. Thanks again.